Hello everyone, Lemme here. Welcome to the week 5 and 6 episode of the Chaos Report for the Blight Challenge League. In this video, we'll be taking another look at our unique item watch list. We'll also be taking a quick look at the current meta situation and see how it has evolved over the last 2 weeks. Lastly, we'll be covering Scarab ghosting and the strategy section of this episode. As always, you can find the timestamps to each section in the pinned comment down below. Also, do keep in mind that these are educated guesses or predictions, and as such, they might not be entirely accurate. Furthermore, I might miss a thing or two that seem obvious to many, and for that I apologize. It's hard to cover everything after all. If I do miss something you think is important, leave it in the comments down below. What that means, of course, is invest at your own risk, as always. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's jump right in. The first segment breaks down currencies and commodities, and more specifically, their changes over the last 2 weeks. Exalted orbs are, of course, up first, as always. They have, since 2 weeks ago, risen to an ungodly 206 chaos, which is the highest exalted orbs have ever been. However, since then, they have finally started to drop and are currently at a 192 chaos price point. They're projected to fall further in the next few days, however, I do not see them reaching 180 chaos anytime soon. Usually, after the first major plateau, we see a large dip with a following slight rise, at which point the exalted orb prices plateau again for a large amount of time. Assuming that this will be the case, we'll likely have them dip another 1 or 2 days, and then go into that slight rise that I previously mentioned. A reminder from last episode, do keep in mind that items will still retain their same exalted prices, so don't go running to try and convert them all to chaos just to save yourself a few dozen or a few hundred chaos, as that's not how the PoE economy works. Exalted orbs are the main currency used for high level trades, and as such, will always have the 1x value, and items priced at that value dip and rise in prices according to the exalted orb prices. As per usual at this point, I'm going to implore you to check the exalted prices at the regular, to make sure you catch all the dips and rises and prices your items accordingly. The alteration orbs have been holding steady at the 5:1 ratio, with a few dips and rises in between, but no major changes here. Their steady prices are likely due to the recent meta shifts increasing the demand for them due to more alt plus regal crafting being done. As their prices have reached the 5:1 ratio, I would highly recommend adding the filter option for tier 2 jewelry mentioned in the last episode, in case you haven't set it up yet. Picking them up is extremely worthwhile at the moment, and will grant you a few extra chaos per map. This is especially true if you're a slower player, as you'll be able to make a ton of extra currency per map if you use multiple portals, increasing your per map income drastically. We'll likely see alteration orbs stick around this price point for probably the remainder of the league, if I had to take a guess. We'll keep an eye on them for the next few weeks and then decide on whether they need this currency slot or not, and potentially replace them with a different currency. Ancient orbs have followed our predictions from the last episode. They have since reached a plateau of about 57 to 58, however their buy price is substantially lower at the current moment in time. Be aware of potential scam attempts or price fixing. They have been fluctuating between about 53 chaos and 58 chaos throughout the entire past 2 weeks, depending on the actual supply on the given day. They always have a slight uptick around Friday to Saturday, as more players will be able to spend more time chancing the headhunters on those days. So keep that in mind in case you want to bulk buy these or potentially sell them. As for future predictions, they'll likely stay around this fluctuating price point throughout the rest of the league, similar to the alteration orbs. This makes the Zana Harbinger mod extremely worthwhile to run, as it not only provides the best map sustain, but with these incredibly high prices for ancient orbs, will also nearly guaranteed make you currency to run, rather than cost you currency and providing maps. In conclusion, continuously run Harbinger on all your high tier maps for map sustain, as the ancient orbs are very likely not going to see a gigantic drop in price anytime soon. Remember here as well to always save up 2 or 3 ancient orbs before you sell them, as selling them in bulk makes it possible to sell them for a higher price per unit. Following that, we've reached the Blighted Maps area with the Chaos Report already, so let's take a look at how the Blighted Maps have changed their prices since the last episode. The overall prices for pretty much all the Blighted Maps have fallen in price, except for the white tier maps, of course. We see that the majority of white maps have risen to a roughly 30 chaos price point. This is likely due to a huge drop in supply after the 3.8.1e changes, which changed the drop table for different tiers of maps and made it impossible to get white blighted maps and yellow or red maps, which is what most people are currently running. The more expensive yellow maps have stuck around at about 37 to 42 chaos, depending on the base map tier. This represents a minuscule increase in prices since last episode. However, it is not really substantial enough difference to cover it in depth here. The price increase is likely due to a similarly dropped supply count for these maps, as most players at this point into the league are already farming their tier 16 Eldritch setups, which means yellow Blighted maps are not dropping for them either. The most expensive Blighted maps are still the tier 15 red maps, just like you would expect, which have all found themselves at about 77 to 80 chaos each, representing a large decrease since last episode's 120 chaos. The other red tier Blighted maps of interest are all above or at tier 13. Each of those maps go for about 54 to 60 chaos at the current moment. The large and drastic price change in the red tier Blighted maps are also caused by the 8.3.1 E changes mentioned previously. This has drastically increased the supply, whereby the demand hasn't really kept up. Now, as we've shown in the week 3 episode, red Blighted maps at tier 13 plus are extremely worthwhile, especially at these prices. What is surprising is that these prices should never happen, as it is always more worthwhile to run the maps, considering that they drop a vast amount more currency than they give for selling at the current moment. As a direct result, we can guesstimate that the overall player base does not enjoy the Blighted map content, regardless of its profitability. The red tier Blighted maps at tier 13 and higher should be around 90 to 100 chaos if you compare them to normal investment to profit ratios of other options in the game. They currently represent one of the best, if not the best, way of making a ton of currency, but they simply aren't run by enough players to offset the amount of maps that drop since the changes. This shows a clear favoritism towards normal mapping, rather than running the extremely high profitability Blighted maps instead. Whether this has something to do with people running glaciers for the majority of the league the last time around, and them simply being sick and tired of easy currency gain, them simply not enjoying the Blighted map encounters themselves, or them not being aware that the profitability is all an open question. There's no real way to know which of these causes might be the main one, or if it's a combination of all of them. The one thing we can say, however, is that red tier Blighted maps at T13 are way underpriced. If you want to make a quick buck, go with those. Seriously. There's no better way to make currency at the moment than bulk buying and running these maps with triple tier oil. With those currencies and Blighted maps covered, let's move on to our unique item watch list. Currently consists of 4 unique items, but we might remove a few this time around to set up our end of league watch list. The Transcendent Flash is the first one on our list, so let's see how it's behaved since the last episode. As predicted in the last episode, it continued its rise after a short while up to a 200 chaos plus price point, however has since then dropped to about 186 chaos again. The price rise was predicted last week, as the meta shifted more towards Cyclone-based builds with either cast while channeling or cast on crit, which both benefit greatly from additional crit multiplier scaling. Additionally, a lot of players have also opted into a normal Cyclone build, which by default will want one of these jewels. At the moment of running this part, it'll run you about 47 chaos total to create your own Transcendent Flash, netting you a profit of around 140 chaos if you intend on selling the resultant Transcendent Flash for its current price. Depending on the popularity of the rest of the league, which seems rather low, and the willingness of the remaining players to switch over to this jewel, the prices could drastically increase in the future. However, it is more likely that the prices for this jewel will stick around this 180-200 chaos price point for the remainder of the league, simply due to more and more players quitting the league, thus decreasing the demand for those jewels that could otherwise exist from people switching their builds. Moving on to the Bottle Faith, we see that the Flask has continued its upwards trend since the last episode, as predicted pretty much. It reached a high point of about 33 Exalted Orbs, but has seen a price drop in the past day or two, down to its current price point of about 30.5 Exalted Orbs, or about 5,740 chaos. That's a lot of chaos. The prices for this one are very easily explained by simply pointing toward the rarity and power of it. It's by far the strongest Flask in the entire game when it comes to DPS increases for crit-based builds, and it's the hardest to obtain at the same time. With the recent rise in popularity of cast on crit Cyclone builds, which rely on getting crits to do the majority of their damage, this Flask grows proportionally to the new demand for it. As there is no real way to properly target farm it, aside from spamming tier 12 plus Zana missions and praying to Chris Wilson himself to finally give you a Cortex encounter, please Chris, the supply is incredibly low. This results in a large, newly created, demand for it, with a shrinking supply as more players are starting to drop this league, thus reducing the amount of random Cortex encounters that spawn. At the same time, however, with more players quitting the league that would also have increased demand, the prices have been falling these past few days, as the prices are simply too high for most players that would be interested in it at the current moment. To wrap this one up, I'm predicting further drop for this one in the next following days. However, do keep in mind that this is one of those unique items with a very low supply, which means the market for can be extremely volatile, as simply buying 2 or 3 of them will drastically reduce the overall number of them on the market. As a result, keep an eye on it yourself, as an update every 2 weeks on the prices won't be enough if you plan to buy or sell these in any way. Following that, we take another look at the Currencies Malice. Yes, I know it's not Currencies, alright? My apologies. Since 2 weeks ago, this weapon has seen a large increase in price, with a rather abrupt fall afterwards. It has been steady at about 90 chaos, up until about 2 days ago when it started dipping again. It's currently sitting at 65 chaos each, still representing a solid choice for any cast on crit builds out there that might want to pick it up in the near future. As we've stated in the last episode, this was a definite possibility, as the Currencies Malice isn't the only weapon that can't be used for cast on crit builds and might be too expensive or too weak for most players' interests. As a result of its drops, we'll likely remove it from the watchlist in the next episode, unless we see another larger meta shift towards it, which would increase the demand for it again. Right now though, it is likely going to continue its fall and place itself around the 50 to 60 chaos range again, the same as it was before the meta shifted towards it. Next up, the double-socketed Tomb Fists. Unlike the Currencies Malice, this item has seen a large increase in popularity in the last few weeks, as we had predicted in the last episode. It has risen from its 650 chaos price point to a very respectable 950 chaos, or about 4.4 to 5 exalted orb price that you can observe at the current moment. In the last few days, it has seen a rather drastic increase, which may or may not be a short-time blip, which would indicate a future drop for this glove to go back down to about 850 chaos, which seems to be more towards the natural rise of the glove's prices. What caused that short price blip is not entirely clear, but it might be caused by a streamer or content creator making a popular build using this item. Caution is advised when buying one such glove as a result of the hit's sudden spike in price. This glove still represents one of the strongest options for the glove slot for any attack build, due to its double abyss jaw sockets and the intimidation feature it provides. As stated last week, this gives the item nearly unparalleled customization potential in the glove slot, as you can simply change your jewel setup, rather than having to recraft an entire item, while also retaining a large portion of its original benefits with the intimidation feature. For farming, simply focus on high-level abysses, preferably at tier 16 of course, to also get a few eye-level 86 Stygian Vices and eye-level 83 Eye Jewels, which still sell for, a decent amount. Also, keep in mind that you can simply check whether an Abyssal Depth has a Lich or not by looking at the loading screen. If the loading screen to the depth has a Shaper on the right side of the screen, it has a Lich. If there's only the Twilight Strand at the loading screen, it means you will get a Stygian Spire. That should accelerate tier 15 farming and below Tomb Fists, as you should absolutely bother with Stygian Spires at tier 16. Now, moving on to a third segment for this video, the meta analysis for week 5 and 6. Comparatively to last episode, there's been pretty much no major changes in the meta. Some Insanities have dropped a percentage, such as the Saboteur, but most Insanities have gained barely a percentage in terms of actual player base above level 96. This indicates to me that a lot of players are simply done with all the characters for this league. Many will have likely stopped playing, as a 2-week stretch in the middle of the league would normally indicate at least a small meta shift, either from starter builds to more advanced, or advanced builds to end of league shenanigans. This, however, does not seem to be much of the case here, as most players have continued to play the exact same characters to the now level 96 ladder. Cyclone is still sitting at around 10% usage, Scourge Arrow at 8%, and the Raised Zombies and Spectres have seen a slight increase in popularity, which is likely just a percentage change due to the bump in the ladder. We're not likely to see any further big changes in the meta for Blight League, as it appears that most players are more or less done with this league, or at least playing it to such a degree that they wouldn't show up on the 96 plus ladder. It is very likely that the overall player base will be gravitating towards more cast on crit Cyclone builds, as more and more of them have been posted on different social medias in showing off their blighted map farming abilities, but we're unlikely to see a major meta shift, if I had to take a guess. As for the Atlas analysis, please refer to the last 4 episodes for recommendations, as they're all still holding true. I got nothing new for this one, I'm sorry about that. With the meta-analysis finished, let's move on to a discussion and strategy segment. Today I'll be explaining a neat trick you can do with the sextants and prophecies mentioned in the last episode. This method is used for actively farming scarabs, either polished or gilded. If you've been setting up your Shaper or Elder maps properly, and have been using your Journeyman and Master Cartographer's sextants diligently, you'll have run into a specific sextant mod that reads as follows. Areas contain an additional Tormented Betrayer. The first 10 possessed monsters drop an additional XYZ tier Scarab. This sextant mod exists on all 3 different types of sextants. The white sextants will grant rusted scarabs, the yellow sextants polished scarabs, and the red ones, well of course, drop gilded scarabs. Now everybody knows the Tormented Spirit mechanic is, let's be frank here, absolute garbage in the game right now. Like, let's be real, it's really bad. Either you end up off-screening the ghost gets stuck on corners, simply doesn't move at all for whatever reason, or it decides to ignore the rare unique mob next to it in favor of randomly disappearing into thin air. So how does this sextant mod actually help you in any way, considering you don't want to spend 30 minutes on each map trying to chase these dumbass ghosts? Well, this is where a prophecy called Possessed Foe and the Zana device mod, Warband, comes into play. The Warband mod will summon 4 groups of at least 4 unique enemies, meaning at least 12 per map. The Possessed Foe prophecy, if procced, will then summon a Tormented Spirit inside of the actual unique mob spawned this way. This means that you'll be able to guarantee yourself 10 Scarabs for every single time that the prophecy procs on one of these sextant maps. As a result, using the red tier sextant, you could get a total of 30 gilded Scarabs per sextant. Assuming, of course, that the prophecy procs 3 times in a row, which is arguably quite utopian. However, keep in mind that this is something you can do on the side, while also rolling your other sextants in normal mapping. See it as a bonus more so than an actual active way to farm Scarab specifically. You could, if you wanted to, of course, re-roll sextants until you hit the right sextant mod, maybe even using sextant blocking to a certain degree. However, I would recommend against that, as the actual chance to roll this sextant mod in specific is at about 2 to 3% at best if you utilize 3 sextants to block bad mods. Instead, I would recommend saving up Possessed Foe prophecies and using them whenever you get the sextant mod randomly, during your normal Shaped/Elder mapping. Alternatively, you could also buy Possessed Foe prophecies. I would recommend buying them for about 25 to 30 chaos at most, as the rough profit margin for polished Scarab activation is at about 40 chaos, if you average out the prices of polished Scarabs and assume that all of them have the same drop chance. The Gilded Scarab Sextant mod has a way higher profit margin, of course, and should always be run with the Warband plus Possessed Foe combination. One additional little tip, if you don't want to run the Warband mod on your map for whatever reason, you can also consider running a June Master mission and hope for the Fortification encounter, as the 4 healing totems will also count as unique mobs that will be possessed by the prophecy. If you're running on a map such as Precinct, the map bosses themselves, as their Warband/Exiles, are also unique monsters and will be possessed by the prophecy as well, granting you more Scarabs. Keep in mind, however, that the Scarab drops are limited to 10 per map. So if you're running a June Fortification encounter together with a Twin Precinct map, you'll easily get the 10 Scarabs dropped, even without the Warband mod required. If you run the Warband mod on a map like that, you're simply wasting the potential to run a Harbinger, which would be way more profitable in this particular case. If you're running a map that does not have unique monsters as the bosses, you'll likely have to run the Warband mod on each individual map that you want to proc the prophecy on, however, as you will not be able to get 10 of them. One last tip, you do not have to seal the prophecy between each use to try and get it to proc. Each activation is its own role. There's no overarching roles for prophecies anymore. However, do not forget to seal the prophecy after the sextant has run out. You don't want to accidentally waste the 20 to 30 chaos that the prophecy is worth on a random map. Trust me, it's happened quite a lot already. Oof. Now, for the last little segment, I'll only be covering the weekly Delve update, as I have personally stopped playing this league actively, only dabbling in it every once in a while. As a result, I don't have any week-to-week rapid-fire tips, which are only applicable in that week or the days following the release of the episode, as I'm not that deep into the game anymore for this league. I'm also only going to be releasing a new Chaos Report episode every 2 weeks, as the economy and the meta have rapidly stalled out, and there's not that many things to discuss anymore. The rapid-fire tips and weekly episodes will return with the next league, of course. Thank you everyone for continuing to show such great support for this series. It means a lot. Now, as promised, the weekly Delve update, as delving is still and will always be one of the best ways to make a large amount of currency in the game. Since the last episode, serrated fossils have seen a slight increase in price. Enchanted fossils have also seen a 3 chaos price increase since the last episode's recommendation. This does not change our overall recommendations for farming, however, as most other fossils have either seen a dip in prices or simply have not simply seen a large enough increase to matter. So, same as the last few episodes, primary objective is the Frozen Hollows, and secondary objective is the Magma Fissure. Serrated fossils currently sell at 20 plus chaos. Enchanted fossils have risen to about 11 chaos each. Pristines have been holding steady at 8 chaos now, and as mentioned, prismatic fossils has also risen from 4 chaos to 6. As always, remember to save up a few and sell them in bulk. Of course, there's a ton more options that I cannot cover on this episode, so feel free to share it in your knowledge in the comments down below if you so choose. Additionally, feel free to provide me with rapid-fire tips over the next month or so that I could include in this section. As mentioned previously, I'm not able to provide any further ones myself, as I'm not playing the league that actively anymore. Feel free to leave a comment in my Discord, Twitter, or below the video down below. I would appreciate that, and I would include them in next week's episode. With those last few tips wrapped up, I'll be ending this Chaos Report. I hope this video was informative and you learned something from it that you can apply to your own game. Please let me know if I missed anything or you would have wanted me to talk about anything in specific that I might not have covered. If you want to support the creation of these videos, feel free to check out my Patreon and maybe consider signing up for it. You can find a link to it in the description down below. Any and all support is highly appreciated. If you have any suggestions for Patreon rewards that you guys would like to see, please let me know in my Discord's feedback channel, down below this video in the comments or on my Twitter. I read all of your comments, everywhere. Furthermore, let me know if you'd like to see me cover a particular topic regarding Path of Exile. I'm always willing to explore new video types. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell thingy-majig, like or dislike the video, and check me out over on twitch.tv/LunaWolf. You can find a link to my stream down below in the description as well. And with that, thanks for watching, and keep farming those exiles.